Well, we are dismissed. Thanks for the introduction. Aaron and Mason, we've been asked to talk on fostering confidence in children. And so since this is about children, perfect, get this dialed in. I figured we should probably start with an introduction of our family. So you'll know a little bit more about our kids and maybe why we were asked to talk on this topic. So we have 3 kids, Justin, Brady, and Paige. And we live in the Kimberly First Ward. And our kids have been awesome. We've really enjoyed our kids. But it's really interesting with kids, as you guys probably know, each kid kind of comes pre-wired. They are who they are. And that's the challenge, is figuring what works for one kid might not work for another one. So our oldest is Justin. He would get in the car, put a seatbelt on. He'd probably have a backpack of snacks and probably even survival stuff. Our second child, Brady, was always running from one thing to another. And it was always interesting because they'd get to the store and Brady never had his shoes. And it was like Justin got to the point where he was always like, Mom, Brady doesn't have his shoes again. And Paige became a great athlete because she spent her whole time chasing after her brothers and actually keeping up with them. But we do need to give a shout out to our neighbor, Gina Hyder, because Gina brought Paige home from church so many times because we left her at church. We forgot her. It happened all the time. So the personalities really identify our kids. And it's fun because having adult kids, these are our kids now. Our oldest, Justin, is married, and our youngest, Paige, is married. And we love who they married. They fit in with our family really well. They add a lot to it. And we love the support that they give to our kids to helps motivate them to be better people. Now, this is our disclaimer, and that is that we have not been professionally trained in this topic at all, other than we have 3 kids, and I think for the most part they are pretty confident. And I really think the reason why we were asked to do this topic on fostering confidence for children was not because of our communication skills or the stories that we're going to share tonight, but really because of our kids. For some reason, they really turned out and have great confidence. They have their challenges, they have their ups and downs, but this is why I wanted to point out our family and our kids, because we really reached out to them and we said, listen, we've been asked to teach this topic on confidence. Help us, give us some ideas. What are some things that gave you confidence as you were growing up as a child? And I said to Lisa that we might be surprised with what some of the responses are. And one of them was Justin. He said, what gave me confidence in life was being around a lot of adults. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, that's an interesting comment. But if you know our family, we raised our kids in the outdoors. So we spent a lot of time doing multi-day whitewater self-support kayak and rafting trips. We did a lot of mountaineering, backcountry skiing, crazy long all-day mountain bike rides. And we really made our kids suffer. And it's funny because Paige has always said when we're out doing these adventures, she's like, I will never make my kids suffer like what you guys are doing to me. And the funny thing is they don't have kids, but I'm almost positive they're going to raise their kids the same way. So by being in the outdoors, a lot of times when we would go on these adventures, we would invite our adult friends. And when they're out in the middle of nowhere and you're suffering, it's pretty much equal ground. So a lot of these adult friends treated our kids as fellow peers. And what that did is Justin said it gave him a lot of confidence. And these relationships they've really maintained these relationships with these adults later on in their life. The other thing that's really beneficial is being a member of our church. You know, the adult leaders that our kids have experienced, we are so grateful for the impact that so many of the adult leaders have on our kids. So now to get into the meat of this topic, what we want to accomplish is 3 things. One of them is understand why it's important for children to have confidence, understanding how children develop confidence, and knowing how you can help your children develop greater confidence. And those are the 3 things that we want to cover. So starting off, the need for instilling confidence. Why? And I like how it says with confidence, Kids do better in life. They're healthier, more optimistic, more socially comfortable, more emotionally secure, and those that are lacking confidence, more anxious, self-conscious, socially inhibited, frustrated, fearful, and prone to failure.
I'm just going to read. There's some great stuff, and you can read the manual online. There's lots and lots of information. Most parents would like their children to develop a high level of confidence. Children usually have confidence in some areas, but lack confidence in others. A child may excel at school, but feel extremely insecure socially or physically. Another child may excel at sports, but lack academic skills. Parents need to help children gain confidence in areas that are important to children's well-being. Parents should recognize and respect their children's interests, talents, and abilities. So, the ways that we help develop this confidence. According to this manual, this says parents can do many things to help their children gain confidence. They can treat their children with love and respect. They can help them gain faith in God. They can help them develop personal integrity. They can help them develop competence in areas that are important to their well-being, and they can involve them in serving others. And we're going to cover all 4 or 5 of those topics. Okay, next slide. Impossible Mountain. This is Elder H. Burke Peterson of the 70. Impossible mountains are climbed by those who have the self-confidence that comes from being truly loved. Children often view themselves according to how they are treated by others, especially by parents and siblings. When they are loved and accepted, they tend to feel lovable and acceptable. It's not so much the circumstances that they find themselves in, it's the stories they tell themselves about those circumstances. And maybe you can relate to that. You can find, we hear from Elder Uchtdorf. Is Elder Uchtdorf finding joy in any circumstances? It's not what's happening to them, it's what they're telling themselves and how they feel their ability is to overcome those challenges. We can't control all the things that are going to happen to them. We just can't. We can't control what's going to happen to us, but we can help them feel confident in their ability to solve whatever problem they have. Parents sometimes underestimate the impact their actions have upon their children. This is kind of a sad story, but it's in here, and I think it's important. Some otherwise loving parents make thoughtless remarks that deeply undermine their children's feeling of confidence and self-worth. One mother who was prone to criticize said to her preschool-age son, "You have a funny-looking nose." Nearly half a century later, the son disclosed to his siblings at a family gathering that he had been self-conscious about his nose his whole life. And they all were surprised, saying that he had nothing funny or even unusual about his appearance. Now, I know we all say offhanded things. I will say, my dear mother, rest her soul, we were great friends, but I cannot. A couple weeks ago, I was in charge of writing a card from a group of us to someone. I'm so self-conscious about my handwriting because my mom would always tell me I had terrible handwriting. She's a great mom, but those things do stick with your kids. Even at this age, I'm writing the card and I'm like, okay, I've got to be really careful. So even offhanded remarks can affect our kids. And I read some other things, not this manual, but it says that oftentimes as parents, our voice becomes their inner voice. So that kind of sunk into me pretty deep. I need to start all over after doing this. We need to start all over with our kids. But we're too tired. We don't want to. But Jesus Christ effectively influenced others because he wisely chose his response to them. Church leaders and professionals are often able to help troubled individuals by listening without reacting, giving direction without preaching, and conveying love and support without rejecting. Parents, too, can convey love and respect even when children disobey. So, find ways, it's the next one. First one we're going to start with is find ways to convey love and respect.
So on this, there are some paragraphs in this lesson manual that are really good, and that's why we're reading a few of them. On this one, parents should find ways to convey love and respect for their children, even when the children are disrespectful and disobedient. Parents can do this without condoning inappropriate behavior. In fact, when they love their children, parents care enough to intervene when children are disobedient by listening and talking to them, nurturing them, helping them solve problems, sharing expectations, giving them choices, imposing natural and logical consequences. All these things should be done out of love, not anger. And this is a part that I really love. It says, love is the governing principle that should motivate and guide all parental interaction with children. Parents can convey love and respect to a disobedient child in many ways.
It's talking about complimenting children. We're going to have to do a little activity. So I'm going to have you just turn to each other if you're alone, get into threes, don't leave anybody out. And I listened to a podcast, and it said to compliment your children on something they have, on things they have control over. So, like, you have such pretty blue eyes. That's a great compliment to tell a child. That's not a bad thing. But what did they do to get their blue eyes? Nothing. So I want you to practice to each other, compliment the other person, and then switch and do the other one on something that they have control over. In this lesson it says, I really appreciate it when you pitch in and help with the chores. I'm proud of you for helping your little sister. There's a million things you can say. And then after, I'm going to ask you for your examples. So. Okay, have you had time to pay each other a compliment? Hopefully it wasn't too hard to come up with something. Just before I asked for examples, I did have a friend, and her youngest son, he was a teenager, and I remember her saying to me, I am trying to compliment him, the only thing she could think of was, nice braided Jeff. It was a rough day, but I've always remembered that, and I've had days like that myself. Okay, who wants to share a compliment they paid? Just give me an example. Did you pay a good compliment to somebody right next to you? Yes, Shirley?
We appreciate his talent in talking to anyone who loves to talk to people feel included.
That's a great compliment, because that's something he does. That's something he practices or he has control over. Anyone else have one they want to share? Yeah.
So my wife homeschools our daughter, and I said I appreciate all of our efforts in homeschooling.
That's definitely something that you have control over. Awesome. So do you see the point of the complimenting something they do, something they have control over, rather than just how tall they are? Not that those are bad things to say, but something that they can take ownership of. The next one is express affection. Spence, I want you to know I love you and I'm glad you're part of our family. And the last one is physical affection. Sometimes a touch on the arm, accompanied by words of affection. It's good to see you can be helpful. Parents should not be offended or react negatively if the child is irritated. If you have teenagers, you know what I mean. I think we always told our kids we loved them, but one of our kids was dating someone, and we became close with their family, and they were so loving to each other. I love you, and hugging. And it was interesting how that changed our family. We decided to bring that into our family, and that person didn't date that person anymore, but we love that example. And so don't be afraid to take something new or to recognize something that you can do better at, because that family really, really affected us. And it really changed the way we relate to each other. We talk about it all the time. Okay, the next slide. Another thing, I listened to a podcast and they told this story, and I don't have a side source for it or anything, but they talked about, say, a class of fourth graders at a school. And they decided, they met with the teachers and they said, we're going to give you teachers, we're going to give you the kids that are already excelling and doing well behaved, and we're going to split them up and put the kids that are struggling and maybe a little harder with you. And this class, we want you to raise the ones that are already doing well. We have this certain goal. We want you to reach these scores. And we can push them a little bit and see how this goes. And so at the end of the time, maybe a semester, they met back, and sure enough, that class had met those higher expectations. They had raised and gotten those higher test scores. And they said, well, guess what? We actually swapped the classes on you. They didn't have the gifted kids or the really, really good kids. But what they expected of those kids, they lived up to. They went and they had nothing else in their mind. If this kid is going to excel, they want to work hard. And I think people do tend to rise to those expectations when they're treated respectfully. Maybe you've heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. If you think you're one of the smart kids, you'll be one of the smart kids. Does that make sense? I thought that was a really interesting story.
On this one, never say anything negative about children. If parents have been saying negative things about their children, they should stop immediately and commit themselves never to do it again. No matter how angry they become or how justified they feel, where reproof is needed, parents can chastise without using negative, demeaning words. The negative words parents say will tend to remain prominently embedded in the children's memories, affecting the way they see themselves and the way they behave. Thoughtless statements such as, "Can't you do anything right?" or "You're so dense," can have a lasting effect. Even well-meaning but negative comments can do damage, such as, "Dan tries hard, but he's not as good as Henry."
So I remember a long time ago, so when we first moved here, we were in Hanson Ward when we were in Chile, and I was pregnant with my oldest child, and Kent Allen was the bishop, and I remember Renee saying this, and it has hit me so hard. She said, never let your children overhear you talking negatively about them. Maybe on the phone to your mom or your friend, saying negative things. Always let them overhear you saying great things about them. And that really stuck with me, and I think that's an important thing to make sure the kids think they're great. And if you do have bad things to say, because we all do, they shouldn't be able to hear those things. I thought that was a good story and something I really remember. Okay, is it you?
That's it.
I love that slide. Okay. Set a good example for your children. Okay, parents should make an effort to be happy, just like we don't have enough to do already, right? We're just going to lay it on you right here. They should try to like themselves and be, without boasting or pride, speak respectfully about their personal abilities and qualities. If parents have problems that make it difficult for them to do this, they need to work them out so these problems are not passed on to their children. They should get help if needed. A depressed teenager recalled that for as long as she could remember, her mother openly spoke of her own inadequacy and self-hatred. So this puts a lot on parents, but I think it is so important for kids to, they take their cues from us. They see how we react to things. I just read a quote today by David O. McKay that said, children are more influenced by the sermons you act than by the sermons you preach. So they're watching. So we're going to have a little activity again. I'm just going to give you an example, and this is just really simple. But let's just say that you got asked to say the prayer in Center, and you walk up there and you trip, and everyone sees it, and it's just embarrassing. So when you get home after church, and your kids are like, "You tripped," what do you say? What do you say in front of your kids? So tell each other what you would say, and then I'm going to ask for some examples. Does anyone want to share what they said? Give me an example. Does anyone?
I said that I got myself back up and said the prayer. So
Perfect.
in life, we're going to have trips and maybe just laugh about it with a lighter sense of humor.
Perfect. Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
I said that, well, I've done that before already when I was younger and I was going up to do a presentation for something else and I did that. So I'm consistent.
Great. Consistency is good, admirable.
And I think the last class we had, it also said, or one of them, I think it was one of these classes where they talked about empathy, and they say, you know, well, that's happened to, like I've had that happen before, maybe it was something else I listened to, but helping them see that that's happened before, or maybe in a memory that will hold.
Right. Excellent point. Thank you. And I know that a lot worse things happen in life besides trip. I mean, that's pretty bad, but things happen. I mean, job loss and lots of things, lots of more serious things, but just an example of how we portray ourselves to our kids. I thought of one thing would be next time when I say the prayer, I'll wash my feet or something, to show that you're not quitting, that's not the end of the world, you're not going to come home and berate yourself. Kids really do watch how you react and pick up on your attitudes. I asked one of my boys who's home for a few weeks, and I told him this scenario, and he's like, well, if you really had confidence, you forgot about it by after church anyway. Like, well, I probably wouldn't have forgotten about it. But they do watch. I do remember I did triathlon, and I took swimming lessons in my 30s to learn to swim. Swimming was not my thing, and I was like, I don't want to be last. I don't want to be last. And I remember As I came out of the water, I was at Durkee's Lake, and one of my kids was following me. I'm not last one, there's one person behind you. So, but they saw that I did it, right? It wasn't last though, but how we portray ourselves is super important. And all of this and this stuff that I read, the number one thing they said was, set a good example of confidence. And I kind of think it comes to faith, they tell you make it sometimes. So.
On this one, show interest in children and care for them. And this is just really some self-evaluating questions. I'm not going to ask for anybody to volunteer to say what the hell they're doing. Do you do things with your child? Do you recognize the good things that your child does? Do you praise your child often without expecting anything in return? Do you encourage your child to develop their talents? How much love do you feel and show for your child? I've got a good friend that this was probably 20 years ago, and I took him mountain biking. There was a group of us, and it was one of those fun rides where you drive to the top and take a vehicle to the bottom. And so it was just a downhill ride. And I remember we all piled in this truck, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and my friend is blue. And we're like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "I can't breathe." And this was just from a downhill ride. And come to find out, he had a heart condition, and he ended up having heart surgery at the Mayo Clinic. And so the joke always was that one, I about killed him on a bike ride, and the other one, I saved his life from this bike ride. But what was interesting is just recently, and so this was 20 years ago, just recently his adult son, who's struggling and having challenges, and adult children have their challenges, and he has a good relationship with his son, but his son said, "Dad, I'd like to get into mountain biking." So you can imagine, he probably has never biked since this time that he went with me 20 years ago and about died. So being the good father that he is, he decided that he would get in the sport with his son. So his son went and bought a mountain bike, and he bought an electric bike so that he was able to keep up with his son. And it was a great time because there was a lot of time traveling to and from the trails. They were able to be outside. And it just showed me what a good example this friend that I have was on being an example to his kid and basically meeting those needs of showing interest in his child.
Okay, the next one is helping children gain faith in God. I want to ask you that first question. How does faith in God relate to confidence in children or confidence in adults?
This is something I've thought about a lot, and I think for me, my own opinion, once you understand that Heavenly Father truly does care about you and that you're important to Him, it makes all the difference in the world. It changes your perspective on everything. I think it gives a person a lot more resilience and a lot more confidence in wanting to try to stretch yourself to be more Christ-like.
Thank you. Perfect. Anyone else have an answer to that different than that? It says, children gain great confidence when they feel secure in their relationship with Heavenly Father and their ability to receive spiritual blessings, promises, direction for their lives. Exactly what she said, when we understand who we are, which is the most basic thing we learn in primary. I am a child of God. And it seems so simple, and we almost hear it so much that I don't know that we really realize what that means. And if we can realize our divine worth and truly who we are, that's the greatest source of confidence. It says confidence also comes from living a clean and virtuous life. Confidence in a life you are living and not to be ashamed of that life can bring confidence. I have a quote from President Hinckley. It has been my privilege on various occasions to converse with the presidents of the United States and important men in other governments. At the close of such occasions, I have reflected on the rewarding experience of standing with confidence in the presence of an acknowledged leader. And then I have thought, what a wonderful thing, what a marvelous thing it would be to stand with confidence in the presence of God. This is the promise held out to every virtuous man and woman. Children will grow towards such confidence as they learn to live faithful, virtuous lives. To help children develop confidence in the Lord, parents should strive to live faithful, virtuous lives, demonstrating their own faith. So there it comes back again to us as examples. Parents should bring up their children in light and truth, making spiritual activities a part of every day. So the next question is, what are you already doing that promotes faith and confidence in your home? And a lot of these are the seminary answers, but I want to hear what you're doing. Yeah.
We're doing, Come Follow Me, but we're also reading the law.
Awesome. Kudos to you. It's great. Anyone else? I know you're all doing great things. Yeah.
Our kids say prayer all the time. They actually fight over who wants to say prayer. It's like, I want to say, so they both say one.
That's great. That's awesome. If you could hear that, they say the prayer and they fight over who gets to say the prayer. Praying all the time. That's great. Yes.
I keep trying to work on it, of course, but pointing out Christ in our everyday life or some topic of the gospel just in their everyday life so that they can see that Christ really is there. The Spirit and just being good human beings is important.
Thank you. So making it a topic of all everyday life, that it's a reality to them. Those are all great things. Says, so I'm just going to read some of these questions that are in the manual. And just think to yourself, we won't have to think all that. What activities are you already doing that promote faith and confidence? And we said some of those things, and you're all doing great things. What do you need to do to ensure those activities continue? What changes are needed to help your children grow in faith and confidence? How can you build your own confidence in the Lord? In guiding your children, do you practice what you teach? And then the last one, do you pray consistently and fervently to help in guiding your children? And I would say that is something we definitely did and do still. We are professional cheerleaders as adult children and professional prayers, I think. And I think we really did pray with specific goals in mind for our kids, I think especially as they got older and now. Specific things. We pray about specific things for each of them. And I think that made a difference. I think it helped us receive the inspiration that we needed.
This section is help children develop personal integrity. And children have been given the light of Christ. And upon reaching the age of accountability, are able to discern right from wrong. As children listen to their consciences and follow their own best judgment, they become less dependent on others and more confident in themselves and their ability to make good decisions. While children must be taught to heed the wise counsel of parents and church leaders, this is the part that I like, it's right there. It says, children must learn to think for themselves and develop confidence in their own ability to manage their lives. This ability grows as children mature and learn to heed inner promptings. Parents can encourage growth by helping their children listen to their self-evaluative thoughts and live in harmony with the light of Christ within them. This one I had a really good example in my life. I have a brother that's a couple years older than me, and I can picture it to this day being in our basement, in my bedroom, and my brother came up to me and said, do you want to have a lot of freedom with mom and dad? You know, what kid's like, well, yeah, tell me. He's like, if they can always trust you, you're going to have a lot of freedom. If you're going to be late, call them. Never lie to them. And so I had an older brother that really set a good example for me. So I would say that I was a pretty obedient child. But it was really hard for my parents to trust me, because when I was 14, I took up whitewater kayaking. It was my passion. I loved it. And I grew up in Twin Falls, and there were only 5 other people that were kayaking at that time. And they were all adults, and they all loved their alcohol. And they loved to take me on trips with them because I was always the designated driver. You know, they would stop at the bars along the way to the river. They would stop at the bars on the way home from the river. They drank a lot. And I know my parents knew this about these guys, but I'm so grateful that they trusted me and let me spend the time with them, because high school for me was horrible. I hated high school. I have yet to go to a class reunion, and I probably never will go to a class reunion. But what I had to get confidence in my life was I had kayaking and I had the freedom and the confidence that that gave me. If my parents would have not trusted me and said, hey, you're with a bad influence, I don't know what confidence I would have had and how I would have turned out to this day. So when we asked our kids and we said, help us, what are some things that gave you confidence? They all came back separately and said, when we were shown trust is when we were given confidence. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think we also brainwashed our kids because we at a young age always said, if we can trust you, we're going to let you have a lot of freedom. And if they would cross the line and do something, we're like, hey, this is towing the line here. And we always kind of really brought forth that trust will bring them a lot of freedom. I really love the quote from the prophet Joseph Smith where he says, teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. I think that's so true that the kids really need the freedom, but as parents we need to kind of make sure they make the right decisions. This paragraph kind of covers that. It says, when a child approaches a parent with a problem, the parent should encourage him or her at a level the child understands to consider personal convictions and spiritual promptings. The parent can ask appropriate questions such as, how do you feel about it? Do you approve of the way that you've handled the problem? You've told me what your friends think is right, but I'm interested in what you think. What is the proper thing to do? When parents ask a child to evaluate his or her own behavior, they should do it in a calm, unaccusing, and uncondemning way. And I think just to sum that up, it's really empowering your child to make decisions and to show them that you support them and helping to nudge them in the right direction.
At the end of that paragraph, I just want to read one part. It says, parents should exercise caution in encouraging self-evaluation in children who are prone to berate themselves excessively. That was probably more me. I didn't need someone to be harder on me, and so I think you know your kids at what level you can kind of promote those self-assessments, if that makes sense. You know your kids and how much you can allow them to do that. Okay, so the next one is help children develop competence. So we have these people with study and we have working. There's lots of good things that we want to help our kids know how to do, just so they can live a healthy and happy life. When parents have high but realistic expectations, their children tend to develop confidence that they can do things successfully. This confidence especially comes when parents provide a loving, supportive environment in which children can learn through trial and error without being demeaned or condemned for failure. Children rarely learn from setbacks and they feel love, support, and encouragement to try again. It says that we should help them develop competence in areas such as work, study, achieving goals, living within rules, and getting along with others. Now, we all know that each of our children is different, and some of them excel at some things and not others. Like at the beginning of the lesson, it talks about some may be really good at sports, but they maybe struggle academically, or they're all very different. And in our family, this is, you should encourage children in their activities that they can succeed at and help them develop their natural abilities. And the parents should not push something on them for the parents' own sake. And I think of football. This is just a really simple overgeneralization, but if you want your kid to be the football star and you're going to push them, and if that kid is not going to be the football star and it's not helping his self-esteem, you should let that go. And we can put that in lots of different things, not just football, but I think that's something we can all kind of visualize in our head. Just a story from our kids. Our oldest played soccer just when they were little, and he just watched the hay trucks, and it was just not that he didn't even like it, but it just wasn't really doing a lot to boost his confidence. And if a kid likes it and they love it and they're the worst one on the team, that's fine. But if you can tell it's not really helping them out and how they feel about themselves, is okay. And so I went to sign up our second son for soccer. And he's like, he always wants to do what his older brother wants to do. And he's like, well, how come I have to play soccer and he doesn't? Justin doesn't have to. And I was just thinking, well, you can play soccer. And I was just not wanting to say that, and then Justin turned around. He was just literally, he said, because I stink. Brady, okay, I stink. And I'm like, well, he knows. He self-evaluated very well. But, and the second child scored 20 goals a game. I mean, each kid is different. That oldest child is definitely an athletic kid in his own right. But that particular thing was not doing anything for his confidence, and we just chose other avenues to help him succeed and gain that confidence. I wanted to tell my daughter, actually didn't ask Jocelyn to tell that story, but I asked Paige if I could tell this one, our daughter. She is just a bright light. Her smile lights up a room. She has really great people skills. She struggled in school. She did not have confidence in schoolwork. You know, she was pulled out for special help, and you know, that tells a kid, well, I'm not one of the smart ones, and then it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling thing. And then we had great teachers, and then we had some bad experiences, and so this perpetuated. And she did struggle with school, and she did not have confidence. We chose to kind of push her in other ways that she did excel in. And so she had confidence. She definitely had confidence in other areas. And I think that was able to spill over and help her get through the hard times of academics, because she had confidence that she could do these other things. Does that make sense? She went to college, and her first week, she was ready to drop out. She went to BYU right out. And my oldest son and his wife, who's the girlfriend at the time, they set her up with some better classes and helped her. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to get her through this. And she finally found a major of social work, which was her skill set. People are her skill set. And she graduated this past December. And we high-fived. We're great cheerleaders. And I think through the hard times with academics, her confidence in other areas spilled over into helping her push through the hard times. So a couple months ago, we got a text, a video, and she said, you guys, you know, I've been stressing out what to do with my life, because if you have young adults, that's what they're always doing, trying to figure out what to do. And she turned on her computer and she said, I'm going to grad school. I'm so proud of her. We're not sure we're ready. We're getting on our cheerleading. We're great cheerleaders. But I'm so proud of her, because I watched her from second grade on. It was a struggle, and just to get her through. But the confidence from other things, I think, really spilled over and gave her the confidence to try. And I think that's important. As we teach our children and give them opportunities, we can watch where they struggle and watch where they naturally can succeed, and kind of tend those things to help them have confidence. So when you have to do school. So when you have to do the things that you're maybe not confident in, you still dare try, and you still can.
On the confidence, when we were raising our kids, I always thought it would be so much easier if we lived on a farm or a ranch, because they're going to have responsibilities, they're going to be out working, and they're just going to feel good about themselves. And so I've always thought how nice that would be. And so I want to share a story about my dad. My dad is Ellis Smith, and he lives in the 5th Ward, and he grew up on a ranch in Wyoming with a really large family. And he shares this story when he was a sophomore in high school. Him and his dad were out looking for cattle. And he talks about how they're coming around this little ridge, and down in the valley on this other side, he sees 3 black cows. And they're like, oh, there's some of our lost cows. And so they went to collect them, and they dropped down, and they're coming up this valley. And as they're getting closer, they realized that it was 3 bears. And one was a mother bear and 2 cubs. And they, of course, kept riding, and the mother bear, one cub ran up the ridge, and the other cub ran up into a little scrub oak tree and had its head sticking out of the top of the tree looking at them. And my dad said to his dad, my grandfather, he said, I'm going to rope that bear. And I've always wondered, my dad's told this story a lot of times, but I've always wondered, well, what response did my grandfather say? Did he say, Ellis, that's a great idea? Or did he say, what are you thinking? That's the stupidest thing ever. I'd love to know that conversation, but my dad tells a story how he pulled the lariat off of his saddle, lassoed that bear, pulled it out of the tree, and right then that bear starts to bawl. So Mama Bear thinks, oh, running away is not the smartest thing, so turns around and starts running down the hill. So what does any good cowboy do in that day and age? They put the lariat around the saddle horn, and they take off as fast as they can, dragging the bear. And they outran the mother, and they ended up taking this cub back to the ranch and put it in the chicken coop. And the next day, the bear was gone, so it returned to its home. But I always thought about that and thought, if you were to do that in this day and age, you would get arrested. You know, you could not do something like that. But think about the confidence that gave my dad. You know, I'm sure he went to school the next day and said, guess what? I roped a bear. And for his whole life, he's able to say, I roped a bear. So the confidence that gave him definitely is something that can't be repeated. I share this story because I think that we should all encourage and find opportunities for our kids to have their own rope a bear experience, as long as it's safe and legal. But sometimes our kids do things and we're just like, well, that's just not a safe thing to do. But sometimes we need to step back and say, is that something that's going to help this kid grow? So that's just one of those funny stories about my dad.
Okay, the last one is involve children in serving others. I just want to ask how we have, being in the church, we have a lot of opportunities for service. And I want to ask you guys, how have you involved your kids in serving others? It's something I always want, go ahead.
One thing that was, I guess, the silver lining about the pandemic and some of the time after is my son and I would take the sacrament to an elderly gentleman in Oxford. And we do that every week. And this brother of ours actually just passed away about a month ago. But I think it was a good experience to go and do that together, and this brother in our ward really appreciated it. He expressed that appreciation to us, and that kind of was a good experience for both of us.
Definitely. Thank you. What a great opportunity. Anyone else?
I really like to serve, and so I just always take my kids. I always take them with all kinds of crazy things. We're always making cookies and delivering them to somebody, or it was May Day, so we delivered treats to older members or even younger members of our awards or just friends that we have. I started a tradition with them that we would go and visit. We did it for young members and took my kids to the veterans of our ward. And then after that, I was like, we should do that. We should do something for the veterans with my kids. So we always go and deliver to the veterans of our ward or to the veterans that, like from other wards that we've been in since they split so much. But go and give those a thank you to them and to help my kids understand the service that they're doing and how we can thank them for that service. But it's fun because they get to interact with other people, like you said, like that they can gain confidence and learn from those people. Those people are always fun to encouraging things to help them be better people.
Thank you. That is wonderful. Anyone else? Yeah.
Every Christmas we have our kids gather up toys that they no longer play with or just don't need, and it's usually very hard for them because then all of a sudden they want those toys. But then we find somebody either in our ward or just in our community that maybe is less fortunate that year, doesn't have much, and we'll either hand deliver them or do like a ding dong ditch, and then we talk about how it made these people so happy to have toys, you know. And I think that just helps your children realize that they can affect other people's lives, even if it's a small way.
It's awesome, Keisha. Thank you so much. Anyone else? I love that example at Christmas time. There's so many ways we can just bring our kids along with us. When they see, I know they see us serving in the church, they see us serving each other, but involving them in any way is really important. I know my brother has always taken, he's always been an elder group president or bishop or something, and he goes on wings and he'd take his little boy, he's 13 now, but even when he was little, he would take him and he would just be working. And I thought, what a great experience for that child. And it builds confidence. It says, in the midst of the miracle of serving, there is the promise of Jesus that by losing ourselves, we find ourselves. Not only do we find ourselves in terms of acknowledging guidance in our lives, but the more we serve our fellow man in appropriate ways, the more substance there is to our soul. Indeed, it is easier to find ourselves because there is more of us to find. And so involving our kids with service is definitely a way to help instill confidence.
So the last story, and really the conclusion of this, there's one story that I remember from college. I think think I learned a lot more, but I remember a professor that shared this story, and it must have made a lasting impact because it's something that I do think about every once in a while. And he said this is a true story that happened in the early 70s. And it took place with a military unit in one of the European countries. I don't remember which one, but it was an artillery gunnery crew. It was this a new class, and they were getting their training manual, and they were getting their team set up, and they were told that their team consisted of 4 people for handling the artillery gun. And the job description was that one person was to load the gun, one person was to aim, and one person was to fire the gun. But the challenge was the crew consisted of 4 people, and they had no idea what the 4th person's job was. So they asked their instructor, well, what's the 4th person do? And he's like, I don't know. It's what the manual says, and it's the way we've always done it. So they started asking around, and they actually worked all the way up to the base commander, and they said, what does the 4th person do? And his response was the same. It's the way we've always done it. It's what the manual says. And they continued to be intrigued and wanted to know what the 4th person does. So as they asked around, someone said, there's a really old timer that lives in this village far away, and he might know what the 4th person does. So they tracked this person down, and they said, okay, we're part of an artillery gunnery crew. What does the 4th person do? And he's like, everybody knows what the 4th person does. He's like, one person loads the gun, one person aims the gun, one person fires the gun, and one person holds the horses. And it's just, this was in the 70s. And you think about that, and I think we get caught up in the same thing. We say, okay, this is how my parents treated and raised me. This is how we did it. We raised one of our kids. This is how some blog says to do things. I think there's a lot of good information that's out there, but I think we also have to say what's applicable to our kids at this moment. And those answers really come through prayer, through seeking, and just being in tune to the Spirit for those promptings on how to respond and to act with your kids. I heard a really good point, and that is a lot of times we go to a conference, we listen to a talk, and there's a lot of points that are talked about, and especially with this one, we have a lot of points that we cover, and hopefully something might have resonated, and you're like, oh, that applies to my kid and my family. But someone said something that was really good, and they said, don't get overwhelmed with all the information. See if you can find 1 or 2 points and just make that a focus and see if you can apply that. For me, in preparing this lesson, the 2 things that my takeaway is the importance of unconditional love for your child and trusting them. Those are my takeaway points. So I challenge you guys at the end of this to really give some thought and see if you can find at least 1, if not 2 points that we've discussed, and see if you can apply it to your lives today. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add or maybe worked for them in raising their kids and helping them gain confidence?
So that's really good information. I think a lot of times the trap that we fall into is that we want to compare how, what our confidence is based in, or what else other people are doing. There's all this comparison that happens, and I think that actually robs us of confidence and robs us of true, value, and to try to avoid allowing our children to see comparison as a means for building confidence necessarily, or as complimenting our children, to not do it with a comparison necessarily, kind of like what Sister Smith was talking about. I think that's kind of an easy trap to fall into.
That's a good point. Thank you.
That's interesting. I read something, because they talked about what is the difference between self-esteem and confidence, and then what is the difference between arrogance and confidence. And someone said about self-esteem was because it's estimating, and to estimate you have to compare it to something else. And so confidence isn't estimating, it's not comparison. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And then the difference between confidence and arrogance is how you treat other people. A confident person doesn't need to treat people poorly. An arrogant person maybe doesn't have the confidence, if that makes sense. So, Thanks for that.
The nice thing about this setting and the other lab classes that we've had is really it gives us an opportunity to benefit each person. We're not the experts, so any other opinions or anything else that you're just kind of feeling like, hey, maybe you should share with the group that was a good impact on helping your kids. Perfect. Well, thank you for your time.